George Perry Floyd Jr. grew up fighting the weight of his environment, his early life marked by struggle, addiction, and the choices that led to several non-violent drug charges. In 2007, he faced his most serious mistake, an aggravated robbery that earned him 5 years in prison, a sentence he served fully. When he walked out, he carried the past on his shoulders, but also a vow to rebuild his life. He moved to Minneapolis, worked security jobs, tried to stay clean, tried to help others, and tried, more than anything, to outrun the shadow of a version of himself he no longer wanted to be. But the world doesn't always let a man escape who he once was. And on May 25, 2020, the cruel twist of dramatic irony struck. Police responded to a call about a suspected counterfeit $20 bill, an unproven nonviolent allegation. George Floyd, a man whose past mistakes were carved into him but behind him, found himself face down on the pavement with Officer Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck. For 9 minutes and 29 seconds, the world watched a man with a criminal record die for something that wasn't a crime at all, and certainly nothing connected to his past. The power dynamic that had once favored authority shifted dramatically after his death, because the man who feared he'd never outrun his past suddenly became a global symbol. Millions rose in his name, demanding change, demanding justice, demanding accountability. The officer who once had power over Floyd's life now faced the justice system himself and was convicted of murder and manslaughter. And in that verdict, a message echoed worldwide. Justice is not earned by being perfect. It is owed by virtue of being human. George Floyd's story is not the story of a perfect man, but of a man who tried, fell, tried again, and deserved the chance to keep trying. His past did not justify his death, and his humanity was greater than the mistakes he once made. The powerful life lesson his story leaves behind is this: a person's past cannot be used as permission to deny them their future. Justice isn't about who someone used to be. It is about how the world chooses to treat them in the moment when their life hangs in the balance. After George Floyd's death ignited a movement that swept across nations, the investigation that followed revealed chilling layers of tension, fear, and responsibility. Prosecutors began piecing together a timeline of decisions made by officers that day, uncovering contradictions in reports, audio gaps in body cam footage, and testimonies that didn't align. Behind closed doors, officials debated whether the nation could withstand the truth of what happened. Not the simplified version seen on video, but the full story of choices, warnings, ignored pleas, and failures that stretched far beyond one officer's knee. As the trial approached, whispers spread inside law enforcement circles that key officers feared the world would discover what really happened in the minutes before the cameras rolled. Some insiders claimed the events leading up to Floyd's restraint were far more chaotic than the public knew, involving miscommunication, ego, and a command chain under pressure. And while Derek Chauvin prepared for a courtroom showdown he believed he could control, prosecutors uncovered something unexpected, something buried in early police reports, something that suggested a turning point in the case was still ahead. The world thought it had seen everything on the street that day, but investigators now believed one missing piece could shift the entire trial, a piece so powerful it might explain not only what happened, but why. And just as the prosecution prepared to reveal this hidden evidence, a new witness came forward, someone who claimed they saw something the cameras never captured. Their testimony could crack the case wide open, or shatter everything the world thought it knew. The new witness stepped into the courthouse under heavy protection, their identity hidden even from most of the legal team, and the moment they spoke, the entire room shifted. They didn't claim to know secret evidence or a hidden conspiracy, but they described something far more human and far more devastating. They said they saw hesitation in one of the officers before George Floyd was pinned down, a split second where someone could have stepped in, stopped the escalation, changed the outcome, but didn't. That hesitation became the prosecution's focus. a symbol of a system trained to follow authority even when instincts say stop. As prosecutors pressed deeper, they began connecting that hesitation to internal departmental pressures, training gaps, and warnings ignored long before Floyd's final moments. And when Chauvin's defense team learned that another officer might be called to testify about the fear and confusion they felt that day, panic quietly rippled behind the scenes. The courtroom tension grew as jurors leaned forward, sensing something major was approaching, something that could redefine responsibility not just for the officers present, but for everyone who shaped the culture behind their decisions. Rumors spread that the prosecution was preparing to reveal documents showing long-standing concerns about use of force techniques eerily similar to the one used on Floyd, reports that had been filed, dismissed, and forgotten. The defense fought to keep them out, knowing those documents could shift the entire narrative and expose a deeper failure than anyone wanted to admit. And on the day the judge prepared to rule on whether those documents would be allowed, an unexpected emergency motion was filed, one so urgent it halted the entire trial and sent everyone scrambling. The motion came from someone no one expected, someone whose involvement could unravel everything or expose the one truth the public had never been told. The emergency motion shook the courtroom like thunder. All eyes turned toward the judge as she paused proceedings, then quietly ordered a closed-door hearing. Inside that locked room, the air was thick with fear and anticipation. The person who filed the motion was revealed. Not a cop, not a prosecutor, but a former internal affairs investigator who had worked at the precinct years before. In their trembling hands was a file, a dossier containing internal complaints, memos, and reports that traced back decades. Reports that documented patterns of excessive force, misconduct, ignored civilian pleas, and training recommendations that were systematically shelved. Every page was a testament to institutional failure. The dossier detailed how earlier warnings eerily similar to the scenario that ended in Floyd's death, had been raised by officers themselves, by their own colleagues, but buried by superiors to avoid scandal. When the door reopened, prosecutors emerged with a steely resolve. Defense attorneys wore pale faces. Jurors sat stunned. The judge ruled the dossier admissible. The courtroom held its breath. The dossier would paint not just a portrait of one tragic night, but an institutional history of negligence, complacency, and silence. As opening arguments resumed, the prosecution promised to draw a direct line from those buried warnings to what happened to Floyd. The world outside braced. But just before the first document was read aloud in open court, the lights in the courthouse flickered, and then everything went dark. Security alarms blared, people gasped, and in the confusion, a figure slipped away, someone who might hold the final key to the truth. The figure disappeared into the shadows, and no one saw where they went. The dossier remained, the cameras were still rolling, but the most important witness, the one who could confirm or deny those long-buried allegations, was gone. The judge banged her gavel. The bailiffs began shouting orders. And the trial, and the truth, hung in limbo. Chaos swept through the courthouse as officers scrambled to restore power, but even when the lights flickered back on, the damage was already done. The mysterious witness who slipped away was nowhere in the building. Prosecutors hurried to secure the dossier, knowing its contents could tilt the case, while defense attorneys whispered urgently, terrified of what this meant for their strategy. The judge called for a temporary recess, but no one was calm. Everyone sensed that the truth was moving faster than the trial itself. Security footage showed only a blurry silhouette leaving through an emergency stairwell, a figure who moved like someone who knew exactly which cameras were broken, exactly which hallways remained unmonitored. Investigators suspected it was someone connected to the old complaints buried inside the dossier, someone who had been silenced before and refused to be silenced again. As rumors spread through the city, Crowds outside the courthouse grew louder, demanding answers, demanding accountability, demanding to know what else had been hidden for so long. Inside, prosecutors pored over the newly admitted files, discovering patterns even they didn't expect. Early warnings, red flags ignored, supervisors who signed off on questionable tactics, and one particular name that kept appearing on reports years apart. That name became the center of their strategy. They believed the missing witness held the final testimony to expose why those warnings were buried and who buried them. And just as they prepared to present their next witness, a bailiff rushed into the courtroom with a sealed note addressed to the judge, written in a shaky hand that suggested fear, urgency, and desperation. The judge opened it, her face draining of color as she read the single sentence inside, then slowly looked up at the attorneys, at the jurors, at the crowded room holding its breath. The note ended with a chilling message that changed everything. I know who erased the reports, and they're still inside this courthouse.